Everyone, and welcome back to the fourth week video of the Kids Skype Study Group videos. And today we'll be carrying on with the characters of the Bible topic. And today, once again, we'll be looking at the next faithful patriarch mentioned in the Hebrews chapter. And today we'll be looking at the next character, and his name is Abraham. A character, when we think about someone or think about the topic of faith, is mentioned almost instantaneously. The character Abraham, for throughout his life he has shown many deeds or extreme actions to support himself towards God and show his faith towards God, we understand. And today, thanking our Lord Savior Jesus Christ and our God, today we'll be carrying on with this week's video about Abraham. So let's go through and see who Abraham was, what Abraham had done, how God had seen Abraham's actions, and eventually how we can put Abraham's actions into our day-to-day lives. So let's first see who Abraham was. And when we come to see Abraham, as the name itself, there is a hint towards Abraham himself and his actions. As it says, the Abraham name itself signifies a father of multitude. However, we understand this patriarchal name was given to Abraham from God to keeping divine intentions with him concerning of Abraham. So due to this, God wanting to keep divine intentions with Abraham, he gives Abraham the name Abraham. But what was Abraham's name before this, though? We see that it's recorded in Genesis 17th chapter 4th to 5th verse. It's recorded that Abraham's name was Abram before. Abram, not Abraham, Abram. So before this, his name was Abram, and God had changed his name to Abraham due to divine intentions, which we can read the verse now, where it says in Genesis 17th chapter, if we read, it talks about Abraham, the name, you can understand. So in Genesis 17th chapter 4th to 5th verse, it says, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram," he says. "Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." So like we said at the start, the Abraham name signifies a father of multitude. It also signifies, to a similar extent, towards a father of many people and a father of many nations, as we can see. However, we also understand that the Abram, the name itself, also refers to something as well. As we understand, Abram refers to the name Hebrew, we should say, or refers to Hebrew, we should say. And we understand now that Abraham and Abram, they both had meanings to them towards Abraham's life and how Abraham's life was going to be, we understand. Or we should say foreshadowing in a way, we could say. But now we should go through and understand about one of the main incidents that happened in Abraham's life, which we understand and helps us understand why Abraham was given the name Abraham. Because in his time, Abraham did not get very much kids. Until 100 years of age, Abraham did not get any kids. And then that's when God put the plan in place for those who lived on earth or believed in God and do things to please God. They will become the family of Abraham. Thus, of course, making clear understanding, that's why Abraham's name is called the father of so many people, we understand. Because the blessing and promise that God had put across to Abraham because of the faith that he showed through his patience and faith when he did not get many kids in his age time, we understand. And because of that, the promise took place towards Abraham, and that's when the name Abraham was given to him, and which we saw already means the father of so many people. Now, let's say about Abraham's genealogy. We understand that Abraham was actually a descendant of Noah and comes from Noah's son Shem. And we understand that Abraham lived with his father, Terah, in a place called Ur, we understand, where his parents were initially idol worshippers. And this is recorded in Joshua 24th chapter, 2nd verse itself, where it records about showing Abraham's parents were idol worshippers. But we understand Abraham himself was a firm believer in Jehovah, the great God, and he believed in the God and the creator of the universe, and he had always followed this. But we have to understand, how did Abraham gain this knowledge though? Because as we understand that it said Abraham parents were idol worshippers. So where did he gain this knowledge? We can understand. Well, it actually says in Genesis 11th chapter a verse for us, or to explain to us how, because it relates to his great granddad Shem, Noah's son. As we understand in Genesis 11th chapter, and we can read 10th and 11th verse. Well, actually, it goes up to the 32nd verse because it talks about Shem's genealogy. But we understand the first two verses itself give us the answer that we need, because we understand it says, this is the account of Shem's family line, the 10th verse says. Then it carries on saying, 2 years after the flood, Shem was 100 years old, and he became the father of Arphaxad, it says. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. So we understand from this, when it specifically says Shem was 500 years old, this verse itself gives us the pointer that if Shem had lived 500 years old, it is most likely, like specified, that he had daughters and sons, that he will live up to the period when Abraham was born. So we believe through speculation that Shem and Abraham had lived in the same period for some time. As specified, Shem had lived for 500 years old, meaning he could have lived through some of his own generations, as that we speculate of, and one of those generations being Abraham. So through this, we think that Abraham could have learnt about the faith of God and the understanding of God through Shem, as we understand that Abraham had no knowledge of this, of course, as his parents were idol worshippers. So now, we're going to go to the key points of how Abraham showed his faith. We're going to see in Hebrews chapter, 11th chapter, we read or understand in the 8 to 19th verse, it explains clearly about Abraham's beautiful faithful actions. But we're going to summarize all of these faithful actions into 3 key points, and we're going to explain about how Abraham showed these actions and thus how God responded to his faithful actions. So the first action was when God told Abraham to leave the land that he was, where he had a healthy fleshly life, which was with his family and with the wealth that he already desired, and he had this opportunity to stay here. But as soon as God commanded Abraham to go to the promised land as commanded, Abraham, with no hesitation, he went to the promised land. He left all of the worldly and fleshly things. He did not only go by himself to show the faith, he also brought his family with him to the promised land, we understand. And he brought his family with no hesitation. And we understand this shows Abraham's faith in this situation. Without any hesitation or worldly attachments, he immediately goes towards God's will and God's understanding, for his faith is only towards God, we understand, not towards the worldly things. We understand this is the first act of faith that is mentioned in the Hebrews chapter, we understand. Then we go on to the second point, where it talks about an important point, like we discussed at the start, about God's promise towards Abraham as a blessing, we understand, to become the seed for the families of earth, we understand. We understand this is recorded in Genesis 12th chapter 3rd verse, where it talks about that Abraham will become the seed of the families of earth for his undyingly patience and faith towards God and obedience to God, to never get fed up or angered over God towards any actions that God says to him. Rather, he stays patient for almost 100 years to wait for the child that he wishes to come. And finally, the child, as we know, is Isaac, finally comes to Abraham, but he's abundantly blessed, though, as a promise towards him for this undoubted faith. As a top off, he is given the promise, we should say, to become the seed of the families of earth. And as mentioned in the 3rd verse, it says, I will bless those who bless you and curse you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, it says. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And then finally, we see the last verse where it is in the third point. And we understand in Genesis 22nd chapter, which we will read now, it says in Genesis 22nd chapter, 15th to 18th verse, where God had tried to test Abraham's faith, we could say. But Abraham once again showed and demonstrated his obedience by his willingness to offer his own promised son, Isaac, towards God as a sacrifice, we understand. And in this situation, which we read now in the 22nd verse, it says, look, 22nd chapter, it says, where's the verse? We can read. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and not have withheld your son and your only son, as you understand, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, we understand, and as the sand on the seashore, we understand. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offsprings all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. Because in this situation, Abraham once again is tested to give the only one and only son that he was given to by God through promise. Once again, God is testing his faith to kill this son. And after the 100 years of Abraham waiting for his child, once again, the joy that he was given to this child, once again, God is testing to kill this child. But once again, without that hesitation, we could say, Abraham, knowing that it is for the good of God and towards the faith of God, he goes to the mountain where he is about to wither his child, we should say, or thither, we could say, because his undyingly faith towards God is once again showed. And because he obeyed to God, God stopped the killing of his child and blessed him with the promise that your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky, or the amount of sand on the seashore, and your offsprings will be blessed as all the nations on the earth, we understand, because you have obeyed me, we understand. So Abraham, in these three occasions, was blessed to an abundant state of amount because of his faithful actions to the end, we understand, because all that his life was to be towards God and show his faith towards God. Nothing else was seen by Abraham as something that would go towards his desires or influence him instead, except what God had told him. And because he followed whatever God had told him, God had gave him the promise and the blessing. And eventually we can understand we must also be like Abraham. We must have a lot of endurance, and we will get those tests and trials, but we must follow the faithful path and still walk, because only if we understand and deliver the faithfulness, we can gain the blessing of the promise, of course, or the promise that we want to deliver, which is to become part of God's kingdom, or we understand, and become the stars of the sky, as we saw in the 17th verse. So overall, we understand an important and a beautiful character once again, which is, of course, Abraham, where he showed his undoubted faith towards God. In every instant where he was tested, he showed his endurance and his faith towards God, and he showed without hesitation or earthly influence or desires or hesitation. He stood towards God, and because of that, he was blessed. And overall, I hope everyone can put part of Abraham's life into their own lives. And that's all for today. See you next time. Bye.